palace slept under a heavy hush, its gilded halls gleaming in the dim morning light. But silence is fragile in a place built on centuries of ritual. Somewhere deep within the stone corridors, a small figure moved with impossible purpose. Camilla's daughter, stepping where no child had dared. The echo of her footsteps was swallowed by shadows, yet it carried a tremor that set every guard on edge. Alarm shattered the quiet, their shrill insistence bouncing off marble and brass. Screens flickered, revealing a young intruder slipping past every locked door. Every barrier meant to safeguard secrets the world was never meant to see. Prince William's voice cut across the comms, calm yet urgent. Lockdown now. No exits. All units. Full alert. In the control room, the head of security's eyes narrowed, heart pounding beneath decades of trained composure. Guards froze mid-step, torn between instinct and obedience. And in that instant, a question hung over the palace like smoke. When duty demands discipline, what happens when human curiosity defies it? Every corridor, every shadow seemed alive, and somewhere in the flicker of surveillance footage, a mysterious presence lingered, waiting, hinting that this intrusion was not random, but the first step toward truths long buried. The corridors were silent now, but the echo of hurried footsteps lingered, a ghost of the chaos that had erupted moments before. Guards had already reacted, but the tension hung thick in the air, like a storm yet to break. Outside, the palace gates remained calm, deceivingly so, while inside, alarms pulsed in staccato urgency. Prince William's voice, calm yet resolute over the palace communication network, had ordered every exit sealed. No one in, no one out. The young intruder, Camilla's daughter, had taken a step where no one dared tread, and in that single action, she had set centuries of discipline and trust teetering on the edge. The camera drifted along the polished marble floors, catching sunlight glimmering through stained glass windows. Every reflection amplified movement, every shadow magnified tension. Guards moved with mechanical precision, scanning each corridor, each doorway. The head of security, a man whose presence had always signaled calm control, now clenched his jaw, eyes darting to the blinking monitors before him. Sector Delta, his voice cut through the comms. All access points locked. I want a visual on that child. Now. A hush settled across the control room. Screens displayed empty corridors, sealed doors, and one anomaly, a figure darting through a narrow passageway, precise beyond youthful recklessness. A silent acknowledgement passed among the guards. Obey orders or follow instinct. Camilla's daughter moved with the agility of someone who knew the palace by instinct. Ancient tapestries, gilded frames, polished brass sconces bore witness to her intrusion. The tension was palpable, not for what she might touch, but for what her presence revealed, the human cost of absolute obedience. Prince William's gaze remained fixed on the screens. The cameras offered every angle, except one corridor, where shadows pooled, the figure flickering like a phantom. She's in the West Wing, he murmured. That area is off limits. All personnel, converge immediately. Do not engage unless necessary. The girl pressed forward, her steps deliberate, careful. It was a quiet act of defiance, a question posed to the foundation of royal authority. When rules collide with curiosity, which should prevail? Guards struggled to answer. A sudden alarm cut through the stillness, metallic, insistent, echoing off vaulted ceilings. Each guard processed it differently. Some with rigid discipline, others with a flicker of doubt. The head of security hovered over the intercom, understanding that his next words could tip the balance between obedience and humanity. Camilla's daughter reached the threshold of the forbidden wing. Her small hand brushed the cold brass of a centuries-old door. Light shimmered on polished floors, shadows stretched, and her reflection merged with history itself. The faint click of a key, not her own, but one discovered through careful observation, opened the door with a reluctant groan, revealing a chamber untouched by casual hands. Inside, the air was thick with dust, the faint scent of preserved paper and wax was lingering. Sealed documents lay in precise order. Artifacts gleamed under soft light. Her gaze absorbed the gravity of the space, understanding in a single heartbeat the weight of secrets kept for generations. This was no mere act of curiosity. It was confrontation with legacy itself. Outside, guards hesitated. One hand gripped ceremonial duty. The other reached instinctively toward a child who might have been just exploring. Tension mounted. How do you enforce centuries of protocol against human instinct? Prince William watched, conflicted. Every protocol demanded intervention, yet something in her posture suggested reverence, understanding, purpose. The camera panned to the head of security, uncertainty in his gaze. He realized the truth unspoken. This intrusion tested more than rules. It tested conscience. The first guard stepped into the corridor. Footsteps echoed like distant thunder. The child turned, recognition flashing, but no fear, only quiet acceptance. Their eyes met, the unspoken understanding stretching between them. Rules and compassion do not always align. A subtle vibration underfoot signaled movement detected by the palace's integrated system. Red lights flared. Protocol dictated containment. Instinct urged caution. The balance of history and morality hung in the air. Camilla's daughter advanced further, touching a gilded handle on a display case. A manuscript, hidden for centuries, revealed itself. Fragile yet defiant, its secrets waited for a mind capable of comprehension. In that suspended moment, the act of intrusion became revelation. A whisper over the intercom broke the tension. All units, proceed with caution. Intruder has reached the central archive. Guards paused, boots echoing like a moral drumbeat against stone. The palace responded as if alive. Corridors stretched longer, shadows deepened, and the weight of centuries pressed upon every shoulder. Prince William leaned closer to the monitor. The narrative of this intrusion would ripple beyond the palace, beyond immediate security. The question remained, confront with force or allow discovery. Camilla's daughter paused before a sealed chest, tracing engraved insignia with care. She would not deface, not destroy. She would observe, understand. Quiet discipline spoke louder than any alarm. Hours later, anomalies appeared in security logs. A missing keycard, a brief sense of deactivation. Nothing criminal, yet deliberate. Guards confronted the unsettling possibility. This breach was intentional. Outside, palace gates remained steadfast. The child stepped back into the corridor, manuscript in hand. Guards watched, poised between action and restraint, caught in the fragile balance of duty and conscience. Prince William exhaled, tension lingering. Cameras flickered. One shadow moved beyond surveillance, a presence fleeting but unmistakable. The intrusion hinted at deeper intent. The palace's secrets were far from fully revealed. As surveillance footage flickers on the screens, a mysterious figure in the shadows hints that the intrusion may have a purpose far beyond mere curiosity, setting the stage for the investigation that will unravel the palace's hidden truths. The echoes of the previous intrusion still lingered in the halls. Marble corridors, now empty, held the memory of hurried footsteps, alarms, and the fleeting shadow of a child who defied centuries of protocol. Prince William stood over the palace's surveillance hub, the weight of authority pressing into his chest, as though the very stones of the building demanded judgment. Every red light, every flicker on the monitors seemed amplified in the hush that followed. The question now was not merely what had happened, but how and why. Security teams moved with deliberate precision, retracing the path of Camilla's daughter. Each corridor was measured, each doorway cataloged. Guards checked access logs, comparing every keycard swipe, every movement recorded by the integrated sensors. Ancient royal directives were consulted, their faded ink and ornate calligraphy a reminder of the centuries of trust and duty that bound the palace together. These were not mere rules. They were the threads holding history and legacy intact, and even a single misstep could fray them dangerously. The head of security reviewed each anomaly. A sensor briefly deactivated here, a key card removed there. Patterns emerged, subtle but undeniable. The child's movements were not random nor careless. There was intent, thoughtfulness, a precise understanding of the palace's defenses. Guards who had once performed their duties without question now found themselves questioning their own vigilance. How could someone so small bypass measures so stringent without leaving a trace of recklessness? In the central archive, investigators pored over old schematics of the West Wing, comparing modern security layouts with those drawn centuries ago. They noted redundancies and weak points that, by all expectation, should never have been exploited. Yet here was evidence. A breach that respected rules yet bypassed them. A contradiction that demanded scrutiny. The palace's history became a living map of oversight. A network of human and mechanical safeguards tested by a single deliberate act. Coded access keys were examined, each one linked to its authorized personnel. The missing key card was not merely misplaced. It was used and returned with a care that spoke of knowledge, not accident. Guards traced its movements through logs, their eyes widening as patterns of intent emerged. The act was deliberate, and deliberate acts in a place like this could never be treated lightly. Questions rose. Was this child merely curious, or had she been guided, intentionally or unknowingly, into knowledge no one was meant to possess? Hours passed. Monitors flickered as teams cross-referenced every camera angle, every entry point. One corridor remained unaccounted for, its cameras temporarily offline. The anomaly, almost imperceptible, drew all attention. A soft tension, invisible but palpable, settled over the room. The palace itself seemed to watch, its silence a counterpoint to alarms that had already faded. The moral question, obedience versus instinct, now extended to security personnel themselves. Every step, every decision, was weighed against centuries of precedent. Meanwhile, the intruder had vanished from immediate surveillance, yet traces remained. Tiny scratches on brass handles, faint impressions on dusted floors, subtle displacements of objects, evidence of presence that betrayed precision and care. Guards followed each trace with a mix of professional detachment and growing unease. The careful, methodical movements suggested purpose beyond mere exploration. Each detail raised the stakes. A palace is not just a building. It is an institution of heritage and trust, and the violation of its space carried implications far beyond the physical. The head of security gathered senior personnel. Screens displayed every camera, every log, every anomaly discovered thus far. We must consider the possibility, he said, voice measured yet grave, that this is not a breach of curiosity, but a probe of intent. Someone is testing the system, and us. Prince William's face reflected tension, his jaw tight. We follow procedure, he said firmly, but we do not assume innocence without evidence. Every movement, every decision, it will be scrutinized. His words echoed down the corridors of responsibility. In these halls, protocol was law, yet instinct had proven uncontainable. Investigators turned to the historical archives. Records of past intrusions, minor though they had seemed, were reviewed. Many have been dismissed as accidents or oversights, yet patterns emerge across decades. Security protocols evolved over time, often in response to curiosity, sometimes rebellion. The palace's defenses were a testament to adaptability, but also a reminder that human behavior could never be fully anticipated. For the guards, doubt crept quietly into their routines. Patrols that had been performed for years now felt heavier. Each footstep measured against the awareness that someone small, unseen, deliberate, had moved with knowledge and purpose they could not fully anticipate. Questions of loyalty and instinct began to weigh. Was enforcement enough when understanding might be required? One subtle anomaly caught the team's attention. A corridor in the north wing had not registered a single sensor trigger, yet footprints suggested passage. How could this happen? A careful check revealed a minor misalignment in the sensor grid, one overlooked for decades. It was a small technical flaw, yet it had allowed an entire path to be exploited. The realization struck everyone. The palace's legacy, built on centuries of vigilance, was only as strong as the weakest human or mechanical link. Meanwhile, the child's movements, though now out of sight, were being reconstructed through indirect evidence. Faint disturbances in dust, slight displacements of archival items, and a careful avoidance of alarms indicated not reckless curiosity, but deliberate intelligence. The palace, so often a stage of ritual and order, had been silently challenged by a presence that respected its past even while bending its rules. As the investigation continued, historical context became essential. Protocols, written in ornate script centuries ago, outlined the precise behavior of guards, procedures for entry, and limits of access. These were not suggestions. They were law, sacred and binding. Yet the child's actions highlighted a tension that existed since the palace's founding. When procedure conflicts with instinct, what guides the conscience of those sworn to uphold it? A soft alarm echoed from the surveillance room. A minor, previously unnoticed anomaly revealed a breach in the camera feed. One corridor unmonitored for nearly an hour. Every guard and investigator froze. This was no longer speculation. It was evidence that the palace itself had been vulnerable, that a system designed to enforce obedience had been circumvented, deliberately and precisely. Prince William studied the screens, weighing the implications. Every protocol had been followed, yet the outcome had been unpredictable. It was a reminder. The palace's rules, as absolute as they seemed, were only effective when human vigilance and morality aligned perfectly. And here, that alignment had faltered. A quiet tension filled the command center. Guards exchanged glances, the weight of responsibility pressing on every shoulder. Every step taken in pursuit of protocol now carried moral significance. Every decision could tip the balance between duty and conscience. Meanwhile, traces of Camilla's daughter's path continued to emerge. A key card returned, a sensor bypassed, a door silently closed, evidence of knowledge beyond mere curiosity. It was a deliberate test of the palace's defenses, a challenge to both security and legacy. The investigators realized that they were not merely retracing steps. They were deciphering intent, reconstructing a deliberate plan from fragments of motion and light. The palace, silent yet vigilant, seemed to acknowledge the tension within its walls. History and protocol had been tested. Human instinct had asserted itself. And in that balance of order and curiosity, a new question arose. Who or what had guided this child to knowledge forbidden, and what did it mean for the integrity of the palace? Hours turned into meticulous review. Every log, every archive procedure, every minor flaw was cataloged, analyzed, and weighed against centuries of precedent. Patterns emerged, intentional, intelligent, precise. The intruder had navigated not by chance, but by understanding. The palace had been probed in a way that respected its history, while revealing its vulnerabilities. The guards and investigators recognized an uncomfortable truth. The breach had been less about disobedience and more about understanding. Yet the moral tension remained. Obedience demanded containment. Instinct suggested restraint. Each officer, trained for decades, found themselves questioning the very rules they had once followed without hesitation. In the West Wing, a corridor remained unmonitored, its shadows deep and untouched. It was a quiet reminder that even in the most fortified place, imperfection persists. The investigation could trace footsteps, reconstruct paths, and identify anomalies, yet it could not yet explain the intent that guided them. That the palace itself seemed to whisper, remained hidden, a mystery that would demand both diligence and conscience. As night fell, the palace took on a different character. Silence returned, yet the air was heavy with questions. Guards patrolled more cautiously, their minds replaying events, logs, and subtle traces. The head of security reviewed his teams, knowing that the smallest oversight could repeat the breach, and perhaps reveal truths even more destabilizing. Every wall, every corridor, every shadow now carried weight. The breach, subtle though it had been, had unsettled centuries of order. Protocols had been tested, instincts had been provoked, and the palace had been forced to acknowledge its own vulnerabilities. A faint red glow on one of the monitors caught the team's attention, a sensor anomaly previously dismissed. It pulsed faintly, as if the palace itself were signaling that the investigation was far from complete. A small breach in the surveillance perimeter remained, a corridor unaccounted for, and a quiet question surfaced. Who is manipulating the palace's most sacred rules, and what truths lie beyond the reach of even the most vigilant watch? The corridors had fallen into a tense stillness, yet every shadow seemed to whisper. Guards lingered at doorways, their training battling instinct, their eyes tracing angles where a child should not have been. Camilla's daughter had moved beyond curiosity into revelation, and the palace itself felt aware of the breach. Each step she had taken was now an echo, each gesture a challenge to centuries of disciplined obedience. The West Wing, sacred and sealed, awaited her presence with quiet inevitability. Prince William monitored the feeds, jaw tight, heartbeat steady, yet tension visible in the subtle tightening of his grip on the console. His voice, calm but resolute, carried across the command center. All units, contain if necessary, but understand, she has reached the restricted chamber. Do not engage unless forced. There was no room for hesitation. Every second weighed like centuries of expectation, and every decision would ripple through the palace's legacy. The forbidden chamber opened before her, a sanctum of history, dust motes dancing in slanting light. Ancient artifacts rested behind glass, sealed manuscripts displayed with reverence, and the air carried the faint metallic scent of centuries-old ink. Her eyes, sharp and deliberate, scanned each item as if the walls themselves were speaking. She did not touch carelessly. She moved with respect, yet with authority born of understanding. This was no longer intrusion. It was communion with the secrets of the past. The first guard stepped cautiously into the corridor outside. His eyes flicked to the monitors, then to the open door. The child's presence was undeniable, yet she bore no sign of fear or recklessness. Their eyes met, a silent confrontation of instinct versus duty. He knew what he must do, yet every fiber of him hesitated. Protocol demanded intervention. Humanity suggested restraint. He swallowed and stepped forward, the sound of his boots echoing like distant thunder. Inside, Camilla's daughter knelt briefly before a sealed manuscript, tracing the intricate script with fingertips careful not to disturb a single page. Each letter, each line, revealed layers of hidden knowledge. Decisions made long ago, letters never sent. Protocols shaped by human desire and fear. The realization struck. The palace's history was not just order, but compromise, secrecy, and human error woven into gold and marble. "Stop her," whispered a guard into his calm, voice barely audible. Another countered. "She has done nothing destructive. Do we enforce blindly or consider the weight of her actions?" The moral tension mounted. Loyalty demanded enforcement. Instinct begged for understanding. Prince William's eyes scanned the chamber via the monitors. He recognized the significance of what she had uncovered. The manuscripts, artifacts, and documents were more than historical. They were testimony to truths long concealed. And yet, the palace's protective instinct demanded containment. He understood then the dilemma every guardian had faced. When the law conflicts with revelation, which prevails? Camilla's daughter stood, lifting a small, sealed document. The engraving caught the light, glinting like a subtle accusation. She held it delicately, as if weighing the consequences in her hands. It was a secret not meant for casual eyes, a truth buried behind layers of ceremony and protocol. In that instant, the chamber's atmosphere thickened. History pressing against the present, legacy against curiosity, protocol against instinct. A guard approached cautiously, hand resting near the ceremonial baton, eyes locked on the intruder. "Step back," he said, voice firm yet careful. "You do not understand the consequences." Her response was measured, almost reverent. "I understand more than you think. I seek knowledge, not chaos." The words hung in the corridor like smoke, challenging authority without defiance, demanding respect without fear. The head of security stepped forward, eyes narrowing at the monitors. "Every protocol must be upheld," he said. Yet, her actions suggest intent, comprehension, and purpose. How do we enforce without overstepping? His voice betrayed the unease of centuries of experience. Guards have been trained to follow orders, not judge intent. Yet intent, as clear as the inscription she studied, demanded recognition. Camilla's daughter gently replaced the manuscript and moved to a pedestal holding a sealed chest. Her fingers traced the engraved insignia, her eyes reflecting comprehension and quiet determination. The artifacts were symbols of trust and secrecy, and in her careful handling, the palace seemed to accept her presence without resistance. It was a subtle challenge to the absolute authority of protocol. Reverence had the power to coexist with curiosity, but only if met with discretion. Whispers echoed along the corridors outside. Guards debated quietly whether intervention was necessary. The conflict was moral as well as procedural. A single step could enforce obedience, but a wrong step could destroy not just a child's trust, but the integrity of centuries-old heritage. Prince William's hand hovered over the intercom. Every action carried consequence, yet hesitation had become part of the calculus. The palace's moral architecture, built over generations, was being tested by a single, deliberate act. He realized that enforcement alone could not contain the implications of her discovery. Camilla's daughter paused at the chest, taking in the gravity of what it contained. Letters sealed and untouched, correspondences between monarchs, advisors, and servants, a tapestry of hidden truths. These were not artifacts. They were revelations of human ambition, loyalty, and compromise. She understood, in a way that transcended age, that the past was not absolute. It was shaped by choices, concealments, and the courage of those willing to see beyond appearances. A guard took a step forward, baton raised, but hesitated. The child looked up, eyes steady, and in that pause, the moral weight shifted. Obedience was no longer a simple measure of discipline. It was a question of judgment, discernment, and humanity. Minutes stretched, though they felt like hours. The palace held its breath. The child replaced one document, touched another briefly, then turned. She had revealed understanding, yet no destruction. The room seemed to exhale in quiet acknowledgement. She had crossed lines, yes, but not recklessly, with precision, care, and purpose. Prince William exhaled slowly, eyes still on the monitors. The breach had become revelation. Protocol had been challenged, instinct tested, and the palace forced to reconsider its own definitions of duty. In the silence that followed, a subtle understanding emerged. The child's curiosity was a mirror, reflecting both the strength and fragility of the system designed to contain it. Then, one monitor flickered. A document previously unseen, partially concealed by shadow, came into view. Its contents, hinted at but not yet clear, suggested that what she had discovered was more than a secret. It was a legacy capable of altering trust, authority, and the very structure of the palace's hierarchy. Whispers of betrayal and uncertainty rippled through the command center. Guards, once confident in the absoluteness of protocol, now faced out. Camilla's daughter, holding the hidden manuscript, looked to the chamber's exit. The weight of history was in her hands, the palace's gaze upon her, the guard's hesitation palpable. She had crossed lines meant to contain not curiosity, but knowledge. And in doing so, she had shifted the balance of power from the authority of tradition to the responsibility of understanding. As she stepped toward the chamber's doorway, one document remained concealed, its contents poised to challenge everything the palace believed about loyalty, trust, and the limits of obedience, setting the stage for revelations that would ripple through every corridor and every heart. The corridors of the palace had grown quiet, yet the weight of what had transpired lingered in the air like a heavy fog. Guards and staff moved with deliberate care, eyes shadowed with doubt and contemplation. The intrusion had been more than a breach of protocol. It had exposed vulnerabilities, not just of systems, but of conscience. Prince William paced the command center, the monitors flickering with every moment of the child's deliberate path, replaying the tension over and over. History, it seemed, had shifted in these quiet halls, and the palace felt the weight of it. The head of security convened his team in the archive room, the air heavy with dust and expectation. Each document, each sealed envelope, told a story of decisions made in silence, of compromises cloaked in ceremony. The child intrusion had revealed what the palace had tried to bury, errors, omissions, and secrets that once exposed could fracture trust. The guards, trained for discipline, now faced a different challenge, understanding the human element within the institution they had pledged to protect. Camilla's daughter had stepped beyond mere curiosity. In her careful handling of manuscripts and artifacts, she had uncovered correspondence that spanned generations, letters between monarchs and advisors, private accounts of loyalty tested, of betrayals concealed. Some notes hinted at deliberate concealments, decisions made to maintain appearances rather than truth. The palace's history, once seen as unassailable, now seemed layered with hidden fractures, each document a testament to the weight of human choice. The moral tension intensified. Guards and officials questioned not only the child's motives, but their own. Where did duty end and judgment begin? Each step taken to enforce protocol now seemed to carry unintended consequences. Loyalty, once measured in adherence to rules, now demanded discernment, empathy, and the courage to confront uncomfortable truths. In the dim light of the archive, one officer traced the edges of a sealed folder. Its contents, though not yet revealed, carried implications that rippled far beyond the chamber. The child had sought understanding, not rebellion, and yet, by seeking it, she had forced the palace to confront its own past. Decisions made in secrecy, choices hidden from view, compromises that had shaped the present. Prince William, watching from the command center, felt a subtle tremor of responsibility shift. Security was no longer a matter of locks and sensors. It was a matter of morality. Protocol, revered for centuries, could no longer be viewed in isolation. The palace itself seemed to breathe, corridors echoing with centuries of choices, some noble, some flawed, all now illuminated by the quiet actions of one deliberate observer. The child's intent became clearer as investigators cross-referenced the manuscripts she had handled. She sought to understand the palace's concealed past, to piece together a history that had been curated and censored for centuries. Her presence illuminated gaps in knowledge, weaknesses in procedure, and the very human fallibility that had long been masked by ritual and ceremony. Whispers filled the halls outside the archive. Guards debated whether to intervene further or allow the discovery to continue. Every moral compass was tested. Enforcement demanded obedience, yet conscience demanded restraint. The palace had become a stage where history, curiosity, and duty intersected, and every participant felt the tension of the unfolding drama. A subtle revelation emerged from the documents. Decisions once thought discreet had consequences that stretched into the present. Allies had been betrayed, promises broken, loyalty questioned. The palace, usually a fortress of certainty, now appeared as a complex network of hidden choices and unseen repercussions. Every artifact, every sealed envelope, carried weight far beyond its physical form. Camilla's daughter, observing and understanding, held herself with quiet reverence. She did not seek chaos nor recognition. Her aim was knowledge, and in her pursuit, she had illuminated truths that even the most vigilant guardians had overlooked. The corridors themselves seemed to pulse with the gravity of her insight, the palace alive with the echoes of decisions made and decisions avoided. Hours passed as the investigation deepened. Guards retraced their steps, re-examined logs, and reviewed every security anomaly. Yet even as they worked, the palace whispered a larger truth. Understanding required more than observation. It demanded courage to confront the inconvenient realities of loyalty, secrecy, and human fallibility. The head of security, reviewing the most sensitive documents, realized that the palace's authority had been both preserved and challenged. The child's intrusion had forced the institution to face its own history with unflinching clarity. Betrayals long hidden, errors long ignored, compromises once convenient, all now required acknowledgement. Outside the chamber, the guards' conversations were hushed, each word carefully weighed. The moral dilemma hung in the air, enforce without question, or temper enforcement with understanding. In this tension, the palace became more than a building. It was a crucible of conscience. Every decision carried implications for legacy, trust, and the fragile balance between order and revelation. Prince William observed quietly, the glow of monitors casting shadows across his face. He understood that the child's actions had forced a reckoning. The palace could no longer hide behind procedure alone. History, secrecy, and morality had converged, and the consequences would reverberate beyond the walls, into every corner where loyalty had once been unquestioned. The child's careful handling of a particular envelope drew attention. Sealed for decades, its content revealed correspondence that contradicted prior records, suggesting concealment not for protection, but for expedience. The palace's moral architecture had been tested, and it had revealed cracks. Guards exchanged uneasy glances, aware that obedience alone could no longer define their purpose. In that quiet chamber, the palace itself seemed to breathe, corridors heavy with the weight of unseen decisions. The child had sought not to defy, but to understand, and in doing so, she had illuminated the shadowed truths of the institution, forcing those sworn to uphold to confront questions they had long avoided. What is loyalty when truth is hidden? What is duty when knowledge threatens stability? As night deepened, the palace exhaled, though tension remained. Guards reviewed logs, re-examined manuscripts, and cataloged every anomaly. The head of security recognized that enforcement without discernment risked further fractures, while restraint demanded courage and judgment. The moral equilibrium was delicate, each choice weighed against legacy, trust, and the human cost of secrecy. Camilla's daughter, stepping lightly through the chamber, replaced manuscripts and artifacts with care. She had revealed truths, yet caused no harm. Her understanding illuminated the fragility of authority, the vulnerability of procedure, and the enduring need for conscience alongside discipline. The narrative closes on a choice yet to be made, whether to expose the palace's hidden past and risk chaos, or preserve the fragile balance of legacy and trust, leaving every character suspended in the shadows of their own decisions. The palace had returned to its measured rhythm, yet the echoes of the intrusion lingered like a soft tremor beneath polished marble and gilded walls. Guards patrolled with quiet precision, their movements deliberate, reflecting the lessons of a day that had tested both instinct and protocol. Prince William surveyed the palace from his office, eyes tracing every corridor, every monitor, as though the very air still carried the weight of unspoken truths. The crisis had passed, yet the palace understood that order was more than enforcement. It was a delicate balance between discipline, conscience, and legacy. The head of security convened the senior officers, their faces lined with fatigue but sharpened by reflection. Every anomaly, every decision, every gap in protocol had been reviewed. The palace's legacy demanded accountability, yet measured with discretion. Camilla's daughter had acted with intention, revealing truths that could have destabilized centuries of trust. Now, the guardians of the palace faced the responsibility of responding with precision, balancing justice and understanding in equal measure. Prince William spoke, voice calm yet firm. Protocol must be upheld. Yet we have seen that adherence without judgment can blind us to truth. Today we exercise both. His words carried the weight of authority tempered with moral insight, the acknowledgement that duty and conscience must coexist. Guards listened, absorbing the gravity of leadership that valued the summit alongside enforcement. Camilla's daughter, though disciplined, was not dismissed. She had crossed boundaries, yet with care and purpose. Her actions had revealed vulnerabilities, yes, but also illuminated the courage to confront history without destruction. The palace recognized that her curiosity, her deliberate intent, had unearthed truths that demanded acknowledgement, not punishment alone. Security protocols were reinforced, gaps closed, and procedures re-examined. Every corridor, every sensor, every key card was scrutinized. Yet, within the meticulous restoration of order, a quiet lesson lingered. Discipline alone cannot sustain an institution. Understanding, courage, and conscience must guide it as well. The palace, ancient and resolute, had been reminded of its human core. The guards, having witnessed both breach and revelation, reflected on their own roles. Obedience had been necessary, yet restraint had proven equally vital. Each officer carried the dual burden of enforcing order and interpreting intent, a balance that required both wisdom and moral courage. The lessons of the day were embedded in every patrol, every glance, every decision. Camilla's daughter faced her assessment with composed dignity. Consequences were measured, appropriate to the breach, yet tempered by recognition of her courage and discernment. She had acted deliberately, revealing uncomfortable truths, yet she had respected the sanctity of the palace. In acknowledging her understanding, the institution affirmed that courage and curiosity could coexist with discipline and tradition. Prince William oversaw the final stages of restoration. Security logs were reconciled, anomalies noted, and the integrity of the palace reaffirmed. Yet he understood that the day's events had left an indelible mark, a reminder that loyalty, protocol, and human instinct are constantly in tension, and that leadership requires the summit to navigate it. As calm returned, the corridor seemed to breathe once more. Guards moved without haste, artifacts gleamed untouched in the palace, steadfast and enduring, reflected the quiet dignity of order restored. Yet beneath the surface, every observer carried a subtle awareness. The boundaries between obedience and understanding, protocol and insight, were not absolute. They had been tested and survived, but only because each individual had exercised judgment alongside duty. Camilla's daughter walked through the halls, her presence now recognized but unobtrusive. She had been disciplined, yes, but her actions had illuminated the interplay of courage, conscience, and legacy. In the quiet acknowledgement of her purpose, the palace affirmed that the weight of order is not carried by rules alone, but by those willing to interpret, understand, and act with both restraint and insight. Conversations among the senior staff were measured, reflecting on the day's events without recrimination. Lessons had been learned, procedures corrected, and vulnerabilities addressed. Yet the palace also carried a subtle truth. History cannot be enforced without understanding, nor can loyalty be demanded without respect for human insight. Each individual now bore the knowledge that order, once restored, must coexist with conscience and courage. Prince William, finally alone in the quiet command center, exhaled. The palace was calm, yet alive with reflection. The crisis had revealed the fragility of absolute authority and the necessity of measured judgment. Protocol was restored, yet the human element, curiosity, courage, discernment, had left an indelible mark on its legacy. The day concluded with silent acknowledgement. Guards patrolled, records updated, and the palace settled into an enduring rhythm. Camilla's daughter, having faced both consequence and recognition, carried with her profound understanding. Knowledge comes with responsibility, and revelation requires respect for both the past and those entrusted to protect it. The palace returned to calm, yet each character carried the weight of what had transpired, reflecting on duty, conscience, and the subtle lessons of courage. Tomorrow, those lessons would echo quietly through every corridor, shaping the enduring legacy of trust and order. The palace had returned to silence, yet it was a silence layered with reflection. Marble corridors gleamed under the soft morning light, carrying the echoes of footsteps long gone. Every archway, every gilded frame, seemed to hold a memory of the day's events. The intrusion, the revelation, the delicate restoration of order. Guards walked with quiet diligence, not merely executing protocol, but carrying in their minds the lessons learned. Loyalty is more than obedience, discipline more than routine. Prince William moved through the halls with measured calm. The way of authority, once pressing like stone, now seemed tempered by understanding. The events had revealed the delicate interplay between human instinct and institutional duty. Every decision, every hesitation, every moment of judgment had left its imprint on the palace, its corridors whispering the subtle truth that order alone cannot define an institution. It is conscience, courage, and insight that give it life. Camilla's daughter moved alongside the polished floors, her steps quiet, reverent. Though disciplined for the breach, she walked freely now, a presence acknowledged rather than constrained. She had confronted history without destruction, curiosity without defiance, and had emerged with both consequence and understanding. Her eyes lingered on the chamber she had entered, each artifact, each manuscript now a symbol of trust, the delicate balance between knowledge and restraint. In the archive, guards reviewed the records one last time. Anomalies had been corrected, procedures reinforced, yet the moral lessons endured. Obedience had been essential, but alone it could not preserve the legacy of the palace. Conscience had guided intervention, and judgment had tempered enforcement. Every officer carried a new awareness. Authority without insight risked frigidity. Discipline without compassion risks injustice. The palace itself seemed to acknowledge this quiet equilibrium. Sunlight spilled through high windows, illuminating dust motes like fragments of memory suspended in air. The walls, steeped in centuries of ritual and ceremony, now bore witness not only to legacy but to the courage of curiosity. Every corridor, every shadow, every glint of gilded frame reflected the enduring truth that even in places of power and tradition, humanity shapes history. Prince William paused before the central hall, reflecting on the lessons of the day. The child's actions had illuminated what centuries of protocol could not. The necessity of discernment, the responsibility of knowledge, the fragile trust that underpins authority. In those silent halls, he understood that the weight of leadership is carried not by rules alone, but by the balance of duty and conscience, of order and insight. Camilla's daughter stood quietly, gazing at a sealed manuscript she had handled days before. The palace had tested her, and she had respected it in return. Her journey had been one of discovery and restraint, a subtle dance between curiosity and reverence. The halls, though restored to calm, seemed to recognize the courage inherent in understanding. The act of seeking truth without desecration, of challenging secrecy without chaos. The guards, senior officers, and Prince William alike reflected on the paradox the intrusion had revealed, that silence and secrecy, carefully preserved, protect both trust and history, yet understanding requires the courage to confront what is hidden. Knowledge, discretion, and conscience must coexist with protocol. Without this equilibrium, even the most venerable institution becomes brittle. Camilla's daughter walked past the corridors she had once breached. The marble floors gleamed beneath her steps, The walls whispered history, and the palace itself seemed to exhale, steady and enduring. She carried no rebellion, no mischief, only a quiet reverence for both the weight of tradition and the responsibility of knowledge. In her presence, the palace's legacy was affirmed not by force, but by the recognition of insight, restraint, and courage. As day waned, Prince William watched from the balcony overlooking the central courtyard. Sunlight softened, shadows lengthened, and a sense of equilibrium settled over the palace. The lessons of obedience, curiosity, and moral judgment would endure in the minds of those who had witnessed them. Order had been restored, but understanding remained, quietly shaping the future. The palace, timeless and resilient, had absorbed the lessons of breach and revelation. Every officer, every guardian, every observer carried a subtle awareness that authority is not absolute, that duty must be tempered by conscience, and that history is preserved not only by enforcement but by the courage to seek truth responsibly. Tomorrow, the palace would awaken again, its corridors alive with routine, yet every shadow and every whisper would carry the quiet lessons of courage, conscience, and the enduring weight of understanding. The balance between tradition and insight would continue, a living testament to the human heart within the halls of power.